Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome back to my Characters Explained series, a series where I cover characters from the game Battle for Neighborville. And in today's video, we're examining the first character I ever covered in this series a second time, that being Kernel Corn. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So, let's start from the beginning. Who is Korn, and what were his gimmicks prior to BFN? Well, Korn has always been in this franchise. He first started in the original game among the other Polt plants, and his role here was being a weaker but more supportive version of Cabbage Polt. He was primarily used for stalling the Horde in this game with his occasional butter attacks. Now, this Korn may look similar to our modern rendition, but it still has its own quirks that I won't go into here. Moving forward in the franchise, Korn also started a 2-punch combo of Garden Warfare 2 and Heroes in 2016, and for Garden Warfare 2 in particular, he featured as an actual playable character here. The kit in Garden Warfare 2 compared to what we got in BFN is quite different, and while I could sit here and discuss all of the differences all day, I frankly don't find that to be necessary. All you really need to know about Garden Warfare 2 Korn is that he's a bit overtuned in this title, easily making him one of the best classes in the game. So that is a rough history lesson on Korn. He's simple, but very effective. And I think something similar can be said about his basic stats, so let's go over these next. Korn in BFN has 125 HP, which is pretty average. His primary weapon, the Cob Busters, deals a base damage of 5.2 per shot, with 6.24 being the critical damage. It has 52 ammo, and the rate of fire for the weapon is 650. That's quite a lot of shots, but obviously the actual damage balances this primary out. I'd overall say his basic stats are quite simple, but he didn't really need anything complex. So with that being said, let's move on to his abilities, starting with Butter Beacon. This ability is pretty straightforward. When activated, Korn throws out a beacon that sticks to most surfaces. When it touches said surfaces, it'll track any enemy that's within its range for a few seconds, and said enemies also take more damage when being attacked. This buffs all damage for all plants, now dealing exactly 1 more damage than it would normally. It's a very simple change, but it makes using this beacon really effective, and sometimes almost a necessity for this character. Overall, I'd say this ability is very good. Next up is the classic Huskop. The Garden Warfare 2 rendition of this ability is one to be reckoned with, I'll say that much. And honestly, it's still pretty good in BFN. For those unfamiliar with this ability, the basic idea is that Korn launches himself in the air with his primary, while firing all of his pellets from said primary underneath him. These pellets deal 9 damage each, which is quite strong. You can also pause yourself in the air if an enemy thinks that slipping backwards will make them safe. It often doesn't. I would overall say that this ability is pretty useful. It's quite effective if it's used right. Finally, we have Shuck Shot, which is interesting. This ability makes Korn fire both of his shucks one by one, and these shucks deal 35 damage and 90 direct damage. Now, here's the thing. These fire individually, and on top of that, you're slowed down whenever you use it. So this ability is very hit or miss, and because of that, I can't really give it too much credit here. So that's Korn's basic kit. Overall, I'd say he's a pretty solid character, though he's not as strong as most of the cast. But luckily, his upgrades give him an extra boost for that exact dilemma, so let's take a look at those next. So Korn's upgrades are of quite an interesting variety in this game. He's got a lot of strange one-off upgrades that most of the characters are never offered, but because of that, there's bound to be some pretty situational picks in this list. Don't let this explanation discourage you though. He's still got some good picks, so let's cover all of them to find out which upgrades are the best. Up first, we have his base upgrades, and starting off here is Butter Branches. With this upgrade equipped, Korn moves twice as fast as he would normally whenever he's ADSing. Now this can be pretty useful in certain situations, like if you need to apply pressure on a sprinting enemy but you also need to aim at them, then this could help you a little bit. But overall, this upgrade is situational at best. Next up is Mob Cobs, which is actually good. This upgrade does a couple of things. The more important piece of the upgrade is that it gives your primary piercing damage, which is something that Korn really benefits from. Each pierce shot does double the damage on the enemy that the pierce shot is hitting, which is quite powerful. But again, that's just half of what we're given here. This upgrade also gives your primary more ammo for about 30 seconds after piercing through enemies. This goes up to 13 extra ammo, so 65 per magazine. I don't think I really need to tell you how good this upgrade is, especially for the cost. You should be running this in almost any build you make. It's a game changer for crowd control. Moving forward, we have Rapid Recob next. This upgrade is one of the simplest in the game. Your reload speed is cut down by 75%. It's a simple change, but it gives you quite a bit of extra firepower. Less downtime means more bullets, and it allows you to constantly apply pressure to pretty much anything that you hit. But ultimately, this is kind of a redundant upgrade when you compare it to our final normal upgrade here, and that would be Super Spin. This is one of those snowball upgrades, and it basically increases your rate of fire every time you get an elimination. The numbers for this upgrade in particular are 695.5 for 1 elim, 744.18 for 2, and 796.27 for 3 and beyond. Each kill gives you 10 seconds of increased rate of fire, and it dissipates after you don't get any elims or shards beyond that time limit. So yeah, this upgrade is Korn's best, and I don't think I need to explain why. Just pair it with mob cobs and you'll see what I mean. Now we move on to Korn's ability upgrades, and these are quite interesting for a few reasons, which I'm sure you'll see soon enough. Starting off with the Butter Beacon upgrades, we have 20/10. This upgrade's premise is super simple. It just increases the beacon range. It's honestly a pretty noticeable change, and it's one that undeniably makes a difference if it's used properly. Overall, I definitely recommend looking into this one. It's pretty good. The other beacon upgrade is Reconnaissance, which is also good for different reasons. This upgrade decreases the cooldown on Butter Beacon for every elim you get on an enemy that's sitting in the ability. The amount of cooldown reduced is 12 seconds across 4 seconds, so even getting 1 kill is enough to bring the beacon back in about 7. That's pretty crazy, and if it's properly utilized, I can see it working really well. Next up are the Huskop upgrades, and first we have Reaping Leap. This upgrade adds dispersion to Huskop's area of damage, which is fine, I guess? I suppose it makes hitting damage easier, but it's kind of a small change. Now, I could criticize it more, but this upgrade only costs 1 point, so I can't really fault it too much here. It's still better than Rough Patch, I'll tell you that much. The other upgrade here is Hopscotch, which makes Huskop do more damage on direct hits. Now, remember when I mentioned that Huskop can actually be somewhat controlled in midair? Well, that mechanic makes this upgrade very practical in certain situations. It's never been easier to melt a space station than now, and that's pretty useful. Finally, we have the Shuck Shot upgrades, and these are unfortunately a bit underwhelming. First up is Happy Feet, which massively increases your movement speed while using the ability. And honestly, this is pretty meh. It's just not very useful outside of getting some cheeky corner elims. As for Cornucopia, this upgrade reduces the cooldown of Shuck Shot whenever you hit or eliminate someone with the ability. The exact numbers are an 8-second reduction on a hit and a 16-second reduction on a vanquish. It's not bad, but I wouldn't really consider it anything other than fine either. It's a good upgrade until you realize that there's more worthwhile options in the upgrade list. So that is all of Korn's upgrades besides Shogun. I made a video on that one already. He has a lot of unique choices here, even if some of them are questionable. But we can still make something good out of these choices, so let's move on to some example builds I made. First up, we've got my personal build, using Super Spin, Mob Cobs, and Reaping Leap. Super Spin and Mob Cobs work together really well, and they make getting your max rate of fire really easy. As for Reaping Leap, this is simply here because, let's be honest, Refreshing Revive and Rough Patch are simply not always useful. Next up is a pressure build, using Rapid Recob and Reconnaissance. Reconnaissance makes it so that your beacon can be easily brought back for extra damage, and Rapid Recob gives you almost constant damage output, so the upgrades here synergize quite well together. Finally, we have a speedy build, using Speedy, Happy Feet, and Butter Branches. If you aim and use Shuck Shot, you can move incredibly fast. Otherwise, this build is pointless. So that was basically Korn in his entirety. And now that we've covered all of that, now we can actually get to how I overall feel about this character. Honestly, Korn is pretty weak compared to a lot of the cast. He's undeniably good, don't get me wrong, but overall he's outclassed by the majority of the roster. Still though, he's a super fun pick, and really his placement on normal tier lists doesn't matter much. Give this guy a shot and see what you think. So with that being said, I will be ending this video here. Thank you all so much for watching until the end, I really do appreciate it. And since you're here, I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts on Korn? Do you think he's good? Do you think he sucks? Well, tell me all of that and more in the comments down below. And if you're new around here and you like what you see, then maybe consider subscribing. It helps me out a ton. Now, with all of that being said, I'm gonna get back to hating on Shogun Guard, so I'll see you guys in my next video. Peace.